welcome to Discovering God's Heart. My name is Randall Rittenberry, and I'm so thankful that you decided to join us this week. I really appreciate you taking the time to look at this video and get some teaching from the Word of God. We're going to continue this week on our series, The Time of the End, Understanding End Time Events, and it's based on a book that I wrote and released in February of this year, 2025, and it's called The Time of the End, Understanding End Time Events. One of the things, and one of the Lord had me when He prompted me to write the book, is He wanted to make sure that when we look at end time events, which are important, they're important to the body. If they weren't important, they wouldn't be in the Bible so much. There's so much in there. In fact, it's the second biggest subject in the Bible, the plan of salvation being the largest subject. But it's important because there's so much misinformation, there's a lot of fear, a lot of speculation, and things like that. And that's one of the things that I really avoided. I mean, I got into some speculation, but I'll let you know that when it was speculation and when it was what the Scripture actually said, there's a difference in those things. And so, one of the things that the Lord really prompted me to do was to make sure that when people read the book, watched these videos, we're going to be developing a master class that I've been trying to get to for about a year now, a master class on this, that the believer would come away prepared and at peace. And we see that in 2 Thessalonians 2:2, where Paul says, concerning these things and concerning the coming of the Lord Jesus, I want to make sure that you're not shaken in mind or soon shaken in mind and troubled. And that's the whole point, is that we be at peace, but we also be prepared, and understanding the times and the seasons that we're in, which we touched on in the first video. We also have a whole chapter dedicated to that. Today, I want us to talk about this imagery that we see. There's an imagery in both Daniel and Revelation of these beasts, and twice in the Scriptures, or more than twice actually, but it's in the Scriptures in two places, in both Daniel and in Revelation. We see this particular image of a beast with 10 horns. We see it first in Daniel 7:7, and let me read that to you. It says, after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth, and it devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse or different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. And then we see this again in Revelation 13:1. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And we'll look at that a little more deeper in just a little bit. Revelation 17:3, we see the exact same image. Revelation 17:3. So he carried me away in the spirit in the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So we see this imagery of 10 horns quite often, and let's go ahead and get this out of the way. The horns are, by interpretation, kings or kingdoms, and we know this from Daniel 7 verse 24, when the angel actually gives Daniel the interpretation of the vision of the beasts. He says, and the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise. There are 10 horns out of this kingdom that are 10 kings that shall arise. We see the same thing over in Revelation 17, verse 12. And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. Now, I'll just kind of give you a spoiler here. The beast is actually the Antichrist. The beast itself is the Antichrist. And which we looked at last week, the imagery of the Antichrist and the characteristics of the Antichrist. And so it says that they will give their power over unto the beast. And so we know this is an end times prophecy. It's an end times event that's going to happen, that there will be 10 horns, or 10 nations, kings or kingdoms, nations that form a coalition that works with the Antichrist. And we know this because we saw it in Revelation 17. Let's look at it again in verse 13, where it says in verse 13, it says, These have one, let's look at verse 12 again. And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So there's a coalition of 10 nations that's going to work with and give their power over unto the Antichrist. And we'll look at that just a little bit more here in just a little bit as we go. And so we want to identify, if we can, we want to identify these horns. We want to identify, really, more importantly, I don't think we can actually identify the actual nations. We can come really close and we can come into some speculation, but we can identify the regions where they come from. And let's start this thought process in Revelation, again in 17, verses 9 through 12. Revelation 17, verses 9 through 12. And it says, And here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. And there are 7 kings. There's our first clue there. There are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, 1 is, the other's not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goes into perdition, or unto destruction. Then it goes on and finishes out the thought about the 10 horns or 10 kings. But we're going to focus right now on this thing about the 7 kings. And so he sees this beast that has 7 heads, and he tells us, here that there's 7 kings, or again 7 kingdoms. And so and he goes on to talk about the 10 horns, which are the kings that will come. But notice how these seven are described. There's 7 kings, and they're described this way. Verse 10, 5 are fallen, 1 is, the other is not yet come. So he's talking about kingdoms that have already fallen, or that have preceded what John is seeing now. They preceded the kingdom that is going on then. Because notice that 5 are fallen, 1 is. Well, we can identify the 1 is. What is the 1 is? The one kingdom that is the kingdom that was the empire that was happening during John's time. John, the Apostle John was given this revelation, and so it was Rome. So the 1 is wrong. So there was the 5 nations that preceded Rome, and then the beast itself actually is called the 8th kingdom. So there's 8 heads actually, but there's 7 heads and 1 beast, which is actually the Antichrist. And we'll come back to that in a minute. But he says there's 5 fallen that have preceded the Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire is the one that is. 5 are fallen, 1 is. And he says the 5 that are fallen, and here they are. I'm going to give you the world powers in order: Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. Those are the 5 that are fallen before the Roman Empire. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. Rome is the one that is, and there's 1 not yet to come. And we want to identify that one, because that is the one who gives their power to the beast. Now, these also coincide with Nebuchadnezzar's dream and image in Daniel chapter 2, when Daniel sees the image of the statue. Whenever Nebuchadnezzar has a dream of the statue, and the Lord reveals to Daniel what it is that he's seeing. And so one of the things we want to notice here is, because when you go back and look at Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece, one thing you'll notice in that Daniel's vision, he doesn't see Egypt and Assyria. He starts with Babylon, because that's where he was at. It's kind of a neat thing. Daniel, in his visions, saw from where he was in history forward. John saw from where he was in history backwards. And so when you can identify that, you can understand that it's easier to make heads and tails of what's going on here with these heads and these horns and all that. So, but these kingdoms will, except for Egypt and Assyria, starting with Babylon, they will coincide with Nebuchadnezzar's image or dream, and he saw this image, this statue that had these different, the head was gold, the chest and arms was silver. We won't get into all that. It's in the book. Please get the book and see that. We will go into more detail in that in the master class as well. But they are in chronological order, and they're in chronological order in Daniel from Babylon forward. They're in chronological order in in Revelation that John saw from where he was at backwards all the way to the very first world power. But one of the things we want to understand about this world power is that the one thing they had in common was the region they were in, and they all persecuted Israel. Israel was persecuted by every one of these nations. That's a very key thing for us to be able to identify the 10-nation coalition that's going to happen in the end times. So, if you look at the Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome, which empire defeated Rome? In chronological order, which empire was it? Well, it was the Ottoman Empire. That's who it was. It was the Ottoman Empire. In fact, when you look at Nebuchadnezzar's image, you'll see that there's it's like, I'm trying to think, belly and thighs of silver. The thighs are iron, and it goes down to the legs. It goes the legs of iron. That's right, thighs and belly of brass. Excuse me. The legs are iron, which are the Roman Empire, and it represents the western and the eastern portions of the west of the Roman Empire because it split. And then the feet are clay and iron, and that is the Ottoman Empire. But the toes are part of the feet. So what I believe will happen is, so when you see 10 horns, there's 10 toes on that statue, that image of Nebuchadnezzar. The 10 horns equal 10 toes. And I believe it to be a revived Ottoman Empire. The toes will be a revived Ottoman Empire. In fact, we have a clue in Daniel 9:26. In Daniel 9:26, it says this. It says, and the people of the prince to come, the people of the prince to come shall, the King James says, shall destroy the people. In fact, let me just read that. Read it. Go to it. Read it. The people of the princess shall come, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. They shall destroy. But actually, in the Hebrew, that word destroy is corrupt and to pervert. Now, is there any world event that happened that would that could fulfill this prophecy of not destruction? Now, a lot of people will think that he's talking about the Roman Empire because the word destroy. And if you use the word destroy here, it would make sense because the Roman Empire did destroy the sanctuary and the city in 70 AD. But I believe that there's something else that happened here. It says the people of the prince to come will corrupt or pervert the city and the sanctuary. And there was an historical event after 70 AD during the Ottoman Empire that happened. It was before the Ottoman Empire, but it was done by a precursor to the Ottoman Empire. And it was the Umayyad Caliphate, and they built the Dome of the Rock. Where did they build the Dome of the Rock? The Dome of the Rock, which is a Muslim shrine, they built that on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. They perverted and corrupted the city and the sanctuary. So I believe all that fits. I believe that's what we're seeing. A lot of people will teach it's a revived Roman Empire. I do not believe that at all. And the reason is because we know, now watch this, the 10 horns, those 10 kings will give their power to the beast. Well, the beast is the Antichrist. We know is from that Syrian region, the north of Jerusalem. Remember that? We saw that last week. If you haven't seen that video, I want to encourage you to go back and get that and look at that video. I want to encourage you to get the book because I go into greater detail in the book. In fact, there will be a link to the book in the description and below the video here. But when we look at this event, I believe it absolutely fits. The other thing that fits too is in Revelation 13:3. Revelation 13:3 says, and I saw one of his heads. Now remember, the heads are kings or kingdoms. And let me address something here real quick. I don't want to go too far on this because for sake of time. But a lot of people believe that. Well, let me read this and then we'll get to that. Revelation 13:3 says, and I saw one of his wounds as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Now, remember what the head is. The head is a nation. It's a kingdom. It's a country. It's what it is, a nation. A lot of times people will read this and they'll look at a world leader that has like a wound, like I mentioned this last week, that a lot of people will try to say that, well, Trump's Antichrist because he had that deadly wound that was healed. He could have killed him, but it was healed. And someone actually made a meme that put Revelation 13:3 on top of that picture of President Trump when he was campaigning and was shot last year in 2024. They will put that and try to infer that he is the Antichrist. This is not talking about a person. It's not a person with a deadly wound that has been healed that we're looking for. It's a country. It's a nation. It's a kingdom that we're looking for. And when you look at the 7 heads, one of them was wounded to death. I believe and then it was healed. So it's going to be revived. It's going to be resurrected, so to speak. And I believe he's talking about the Ottoman Empire, because it was killed. There is no Ottoman Empire right now. There's not. The Ottoman Empire was destroyed more from political things than it was military things. But the Ottoman Empire allied itself in World War I with Germany, and so what ended up happening was that the Allies in World War I ended up coming in, and politically because of that choice, it was a political death, is what it was. A political death, so to speak. And so I believe that there will be 10 nations from that Ottoman Empire in that region that will form that coalition. Now, one of the key characteristics that we have to understand about these nations, is that they're all Muslim. They're from that region. They're from the Middle East. So they're going to all be Muslim, because all the countries in that area, except for Israel, their religion is Islam. Islam is going to play a huge role in end-time events. It's already playing a huge role in politics all across the world, but it's going to play a huge role in regard to end-time events. One of the things we have to understand is that there are two. Remember what I said before about foreshadowing and fulfillment? There's been foreshadowing of this already. In 1947, there was a society formed in the Middle East called the Arab League. And their stated purpose was to prevent the establishment of an Israeli state. In 1948, when the Israeli state was established, they changed their goal, and now their goal, since 1948, is the destruction of the Israeli state. One of the predominant belief systems in Islam is the destruction of Israel. The destruction of Israel. You could actually argue that Muhammad started Islam as a way to galvanize these bands of tribes that were scattered across all over the Middle East fighting with each other. He galvanized them under the religion of Islam so they could all to go against Israel, to destroy Israel. And the second goal that this Arab League, well, not just the Arab League, we had the Arab League and we had ISIS. The stated goal of Islamists is that they established Islam as a world religion. So that's everything they do motivates, everything that they do is motivated by their Islamic belief system. Destroy Israel and bring the infidels under their thumb across the world. You're already seeing that in England. They have a big area. In London, they have a big area that has Sharia law. You see in the United States, in Dearborn, Michigan, they go around the world and they set up neighborhoods. They set up their little societies. They set up their little areas, and then they try to influence through politics to get Sharia law enacted. That's how it's being done. But here's what's interesting, because it says that they give their power to the beast they have power to the beast for 1 hour, but it says they give over to the beast. Here's what it says, and I think it's in Revelation 17 again. It says, these have one mind. Well, what's the one mind? Their one mind is going to be to destroy Israel. And I'll tell you why here in just a minute. They want to destroy Israel. That's their entire purpose. And to bring the whole world under subjection to Islam. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. In other words, all of their military and economic might, he will be over all of that. They will rule with him. They will be independent states subject to him. Now here's, and I didn't talk about this last week about the Antichrist. But what we need to understand that why will they give him that kind of power? Why would they? Now remember, they're all Muslim. They're Islamic. They're Muslim states. They will see the Antichrist as their Muslim Mahdi. And a Muslim Mahdi is this. It is a Muslim caliph that is predicted by Islamic groups, is predicted to usher in the rule of worldwide Islam. Here's what's interesting. The Islamic tradition states that he will rule for 7 years. In fact, what Islam teaches, at least portions of Islam, what they teach about their Mahdi parallels what the Bible teaches about the Antichrist. He'll rule for 7 years. You know, I don't have time to go into the whole thing. It's against in the book. I lay all this out in that book. They will believe that he is the Muslim Mahdi, that he is the one to rule and to bring Islam to the forefront, to bring the world under control of Islam. And they believe he's the man that will drive and drive and drive to destroy Israel. And so the 10 nations will hand over their power to what they believe is their Mahdi. We've already seen this in Revelation 17, 12 to 13. They have one mind. In Revelation 13:5, watch this is so important. And it says, and there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies and power. Notice what we saw in Revelation 17. They give their power unto the beast. They have one mind, give their power to the beast. And it says, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. What is 42 months? 42 months. It is actually, in the Jewish calendar, it is exactly 3.5 years. Exactly 3.5 years. 42 months is 3.5 years. So they give their power to him when? In the middle of the year, in the middle of the week of Daniel's 70th week, in the middle of that 7-year period, they're going to give him their military and economic power. And why do they do that? That is how he's going to be able to go into Israel and take over the temple. That's how he's going to bring about the abomination of desolation, because he will have the military and economic might to go in and actually do that. And when you go back, and we'll look at this more in 2 or 3 weeks, I'm not sure exactly when, but when you start to read Jeremiah, in Jeremiah 4 especially, in light of this event, you know, it's from that day forward, it says that the Great Tribulation starts. You know, tribulation is the first 3.5 years. The Great Tribulation will be the last 3.5 years. Why? Because that's the time, and we'll look at this again. I'm going to tease you just a little bit. That's the time of Jacob's trouble, that last 3.5 years. We see the same thing in Daniel 7:25. It says, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints. Well, the saints in this context is Israel. He shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time, times, and dividing of time. And when you look this up in the Hebrew, it is a year, years, and half a year. So it is 3, and it's a year, 2 years, and a half a year. So it's 3.5 years total. You know, I'll leave you with this thought here. You know, we've established, and this is what we've established today. We've established that there will be a 10-nation coalition of Muslim nations that will rise up and take power. My speculation, and it is my opinion, this is not scriptural, that they'll actually start that before the tribulation. The 10-nation coalition will actually probably form in principle and in organizational wise anyway before that. And the question is, what's the catalyst? What's going to cause them to want to come together and come against Israel that strongly, so strongly that for the first time in probably ever in Islamic history, except for maybe the 6-day war and things like that, when you've had maybe 2 or 3 groups work together, when you have 10 nations working together for one goal, and that's to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, what could be the catalyst for that? Here's what the catalyst is, I believe. I believe the catalyst will be the building of the third temple. Now, it's possible that they would have to destroy the Dome of the Rock, which is a Muslim shrine. It's not, you know, it's not a synagogue, but it is a shrine. There's also speculation that on the Temple Mount, that where the Dome of the Rock is built, that the actual temple was beside it. If you're looking at it straight ahead, the Dome of the Rock will be on the left, and then the temple could be on the right. But I'm telling you, Muslims will not put up with a shared space. They won't put up with a shared space at all. Or it could actually be in another spot, not even right there where they think the Temple Mount is. I tend to believe that's where it's at, but I'm not an expert in archaeology, so just take that with a grain of salt. But even if they build it somewhere else, I believe it would be enough for the Muslim world to galvanize around that goal. I believe it more to be they'll either have to destroy the Dome of the Rock or build beside it, and it will absolutely send them into a frenzy, and that will begin the beginning of what we see as the 10-nation coalition. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. I hope that this has helped you. The one reason it's important to understand this about the Muslim aspect of this is because being able to see the way the world over the past, I would say 30 years, the past 30 years, 25 years anyway. I can remember when 9/11 happened, a lot of people in America especially come against the Islamic faith, and because it was Muslims that alleged it was them that drove the planes into the World Trade Center. Whatever you want to believe about that, that's not, there's a lot of conspiracy theory around that, but regardless, they were involved, and then to see everything we've done over there with the Gulf War and Operation Desert Storm, but what you've seen over the past 20 years, 25 years, maybe 20 years, is a reversal of that thought, and you have people that are actually people who aren't even Muslim that are siding with them. They're siding with them in things, and which is their right to do. I'm not going to do that because I'm a believer in the Lord Jesus and a supporter of Israel. But with all that said, we had to understand the times that we're in, that the Muslim faith, the Islamists are going to continue to gain power and gain power and gain power, and to bring the world governments under their influence. That's what we have to kind of watch for and see. What we have to understand is, though, as that's going on, we have to be resolute in our faith, that we're going to stand in our faith. That's the whole point of that, is that may be going on, but I'm going to be resolute in my faith. I will say this: I think that when we see that 10-nation coalition start, we will know that we're very close. We're not far off from the return of the Lord Jesus. Well, that's all we're going to have for this week, and join us again next week as we'll continue to look at different elements of end times and trying to understand these end time events and see what the Bible actually teaches about these things. So until then, be blessed, and we'll see you then.